Welcome to the GXM podcast, where we explore news and topics around video game music and the intersection between the games and music industries. We aim to publish fortnightly. We failed of late, but we're going to get back to that, so please be sure to subscribe. My name's Tom Quillfeldt. I work for game soundtrack label Laced Records, and I podcast with the Cane and Rinse crew. Joining me is journalist Mat Ombler, who has interviewed game composers, music artists and others for titles including NME, The Washington Post and Wired. Matt, you're back!
I am. It feels like it's been forever. I have been getting married.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you. I have been on a lovely honeymoon in Japan with some rest days in Dubai afterwards. And yeah, it's nice to be back.
Go on, tell us what video game music themed things you did for your wedding. You must have done something.
Yeah, right. So you know what? I'm gutted there's no video footage of this, but I hired a string quartet. I wanted a string quartet anyway, but then I found a string quartet that takes arrangements. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna commission 4 arrangements. And me and Liz chose 2. So we chose a Studio Ghibli song from Howl's Moving Castle. I've forgotten the name of the song.
Nice. Is it just the one that goes da 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 da?
I think it was that. You know what? I actually think it was that one.
I think it's just the main sort of theme waltz or something.
I think it was. And then chose You're Not Alone from Final Fantasy IX, because me and Liz don't have that many songs with like sentimental attachment, but there's a weird thing there when we were back from a night out, and it was when me and Liz first started dating, and I convinced her I could ballroom dance and put on the Distant Worlds version of that song, which was real funny at the time, and then realised that I had 2 arrangements left. So I was like, okay, cool. Liz is preoccupied doing other wedding things. I'm just going to take the lead and step up and choose these other 2 arrangements myself. So I chose
Doom BFG Division.
Yeah, imagine. It was the Halo 3 menu music, because I had a couple of schoolmates there who just used to spend all our days playing Halo, and I just honestly, that was like more of like a for the bands thing. it was class. And then also Scarlet's theme from Chrono Trigger, which is just a song that I absolutely love, and thought, this is going to work really well for a string quartet, and I've never actually heard a string quartet version of this song. And the string quartet, they absolutely smashed it out of the park. The Didsbury String Quartet, they were called. So if you live up north and would like... So they've got the sheet music now. Do you know what I mean? So if you want to hear those pieces at your wedding, do get in touch and tell them Ombler sent you. But yeah, it was amazing, man. It was absolutely class.
Very nice. Well, we'll be talking a little bit later about your experience of immersing yourself in the soundtrack buying experience in Japan. It looked from the photos that you had an incredible time doing that. I worry for your poor wife that she just got dragged from store to store, but we'll get to that a bit later. We've got I've had a busy time whilst you've been away. I did the interview with Colin Yost about video game A&R last time. So if you haven't heard that yet, go and check that out. And I also did another interview, which I will mention briefly a bit later. And I went to 2 concerts in quite short order. There was the Starfield performance with the London Symphony Orchestra at the London Symphony Orchestra's home at St Luke's Church in London. I was invited there, thank you very much to Bethesda's Mark Robbins, who sort of organised it, and he's been instrumental in things like a Skyrim concert several years ago, Fallout and concert. He's a huge video game music fan. He was behind the campaign to get video game music into the Classic FM Hall of Fame all those years ago. But yeah, thanks to Mark for inviting me down to the Starfield event. It was incredible. It was lovely to see, I mean, it's the LSO, isn't it? And Inon Zur kind of passionately conducted the first and last pieces. The whole concert's up on YouTube for anyone to check out, and they absolutely should. Interestingly, the producer of that show was the Final Symphony producer, Thomas Booker, who organised the camera crew and the orchestra and the venue and everything, and was the sort of overall producer of it from a logistics standpoint, which was interesting to note. And it was just, it was an incredible evening. I got to sit next to one of the former editors of CVG magazine, who was editing it while I started getting into games magazines back in 1997. So that was quite weird, talking to him about that. But everyone should go and check that out. And then, Matt, devastatingly, you had to give up your ticket to Sonic Symphony. It was the first show of the world tour. It was the matinee performance in London at the Barbican, and I took your ticket, and I felt terrible doing so because it was an absolute stonker of a show. It was incredible.
The less time we can spend talking about this, the better, because genuinely, I am so gutted I couldn't be there, because I think I've watched the recorded version of that show on YouTube about 7 or 8 times now, and I have a very sentimental attachment to not just the music in Sonic the Hedgehog, but especially the kind of more alternative stuff in Sonic Adventure 2 from Crush 40. So yeah, without talking about it too much, just tell me how different was it to the, like, were there any surprises for people who had already seen the recorded version that's on YouTube?
I really don't know. There was definitely some new material that they sort of said at the time, oh, here's a new one or whatever, but that might have been the Sonic Frontiers stuff. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really watched the sort of existing YouTube video. And later on in the show, actually, I went to the show with Richard Stokes, who, if anyone's been to any of these video game concerts, you've probably seen Richard there. I mean, he must have been to 20, 30 concerts up and down the country. He gets to every single video game concert he possibly can. And he and I did a mini interview on my iPhone outside the venue just after we'd come out, and we were buzzing, and everyone around us was buzzing. So you'll get to hear some of that kind of contact high, that Sonic contact high later on. I'll run the interview. And also, in the meantime, there have been some exciting trailers, states of play, Nintendo Directs. I particularly really liked the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth trailer that they dropped, the announcement date trailer. They had a kind of action version of the main theme, which sounded new and exciting. I bet it wasn't new. I bet someone will tell me it was an old track, but they kind of showed all the nostalgic Final Fantasy VII stuff in that trailer without really hinting at what they've changed for the story or what's going to get shifted around. So it was just like a big nostalgia play, I think, for them, with a couple of kind of gags like Cloud on a what are those things on wheels that you stand up on? Segway.
I hated that. Honestly, from seeing people, I've got a rational hatred for people on Segways and like scooters, electric scooters. So I saw that and just went,
well, it was pretty much as far as I could tell, it's one of the only new things. Everything else seemed to be like, here's what you remember from the game. Did you pick anything out from any of these recent sort of trailer splat?
Yeah, I guess without going into the music real quickly, I thought it was interesting to see a bit of gameplay footage in that Final Fantasy trailer that hinted at an open world section, because I'd ruled that out. So I'm interested to see what comes out of that. But I think, honestly, one of my biggest highlights was F-Zero fans, Nintendo fans have been waiting for a new F-Zero game for over 20 years since the release of, what was the last one called? I think it was GP Legend on the Game Boy Advance. A new F-Zero game got announced. It wasn't a Switch game. It was essentially a Battle Royale version of the F-Zero on SNES. It's better than nothing, I guess, but that just got me thinking and kind of getting nostalgic for F-Zero music, which a lot of people, if you've played the F-Zero games, especially 64 on Nintendo 64 and GX on GameCube, they're associated with like guitar heavy, like power metal music. But I took this as an opportunity to revisit the 1992 officially licensed jazz arrangement album featuring none other than the legendary saxophonist Mark Russo of the Doobie Brothers, who is no stranger to the world of video game music because he also composed all of the music in the Sims games. That
no way.
That lovely smooth jazz music that so many people have fallen in love with. So
crazy.
If you just go on YouTube and type in F-Zero jazz album, you can listen to the thing in full. It's absolutely incredible, and I hope it played some part in setting the tone for the F-Zero arrangements in the Mario Kart games, because this is like full-blown jazz fusion. It's off the wall. Yeah, it's intense.
Nice. I never thought that the Doobie Brothers would come up in this podcast, but there you go.
There we go.
And someone made the point that if there was going to be a new shiny F-Zero, they'd probably save it for Switch 2 at this stage, because racing games are good to show off new consoles generally. But we must get to the news because we have so much to talk about that's happened, that's come up, things that came and went since we last spoke. So let's get into the news. So first up, it is already over, sadly, but it's all available to stream. There was a online games music festival called Save and Sound, which was run by the developer Bedtime Digital Games, who made Figment 2, and the Forest Quartet, which are sort of music-related games, heavily music-related games, I'd say, very thoughtful and clever experiences. Worth checking out those games anyway, but this 3-day festival had music from some 70 games or something, and some absolute killers in there, Chia and Baldur's Gate 3, and just so much really, really good stuff. And they had a lot of kind of behind the scenes videos, live recorded performances. I didn't get a chance to catch much at the time. I only found out about it on the first day, so I recommend everybody go back and check out. Just sort of dip in and see what takes your fancy, really, of the many, many games. There was a talk by Jonas Turner, who is a audio professional and composer who's worked for many, many years on some huge indie games. He's handling all the audio for a game called Go Mecha Ball. And he just gave this brilliant talk about, and he showed examples, and he tried to keep it really tight and really brief, but kind of talking to layperson game players about exactly what, kind of differences in sound design, little tricks and triggers and engine information he's getting to set up procedural sound design things and randomizers and all of this clever stuff. And then the soundtrack he's created that's interactive as well. It was so clever, but also the way he presented it was really good to understand, I think, for someone who doesn't work in audio. And I said so on Twitter, and he got in touch and said, "Hey, do you want to interview for the podcast?" So we did the interview. That's in the bank already, and that will be coming up. I think next time, probably next fortnight, depending on what else we've got, because we've got some very exciting guests lined up. So Matt, I know you haven't seen any of this yet. You're still catching up after getting back from honeymoon, but I definitely recommend just sort of dipping in, maybe have a look at the games list and sort of see if there's anyone that you want to. So TMNT Shredder's Revenge is in there as well. I don't exactly know if T. Lopez did what he did for that. So definitely check that out. And I know you've been loving the Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Soundtrack as well. So you should probably check that out as well, at least. Very quickly, Goodbye Volcano High was released, which is an indie game that's sort of a visual novel with rhythm game elements. There's a kind of Battle of the Bands storyline in there. It's got an 83 on Metacritic, so obviously people are really vibing on it. So I haven't had a chance to check it out, but I just wanted to flag that up for people. There's a couple of things happening at EGX. We already mentioned there's Chip Cell, there's a David Housden talk, but they've just announced that Ready Singer 1 it's the only choir in the UK to exclusively sing songs from video games and film, and they'll be on the EGX Theatre on Sunday the 15th of October at 3 p.m. So I think that's spread out now over 3 days, those the Housden thing, the Chipsall thing, and Ready Singer 1. So depending on what day you go, you might be able to catch something video game music related. There was a big story this week that probably would have been bigger if the huge Unity controversy wasn't happening at the same time. But Terence Lee, aka Lifeformed, took to Twitter, to X, to say that he'd been the victim of a DMCA takedown fraud, that he'd been threatened via messenger from a random person saying that they'd get his music taken down. And they did follow through that as far as I can tell. And that's the soundtracks to Tunic, Fastfall, Umbra and Undiscovery. And they've been taken down from various streaming platforms. As far as I'm aware, he was Terence very upset about it, as you can imagine. And the most upsetting part of it was he was trying to work out what recourse there was, what you can actually do in that situation if you've gone through a distributor like DistroKid or TuneCore or something like that. Do you have any protection against a fraudulent claim under the DMCA takedown system? And I don't know if there's actually been a resolution to this. As I say, the Unity story kind of overshadowing it slightly. Bing! So this is Tom binging in from the future on Edit Day. Fortunately, as of September 22nd, the Tunic and other soundtracks seem to be back up, according to Lifeformed. Apparently, they submitted a counterclaim to their distributor and waited 2 weeks. They also had a lawyer try to talk to their distributor to move things along. Apparently, they'll share more details in future. And as a nice bonus, they've released lots of extra details and some piano sketches on their Twitter. So definitely go and check that out if you like that soundtrack, like I did. Bing! And then also, to add to the story, apparently the Deltarune Chapter 1 soundtrack has also received a fraudulent takedown notice. Obviously, we know there are nasty people on the internet, and it seems like this could be another way for kind of malicious actors now to spend a few weeks torturing indie games and indie game soundtrack creators, unfortunately. Hopefully, we hope for good news at the end of the story, but there's none forthcoming at the moment. Deltarune is obviously made by Toby Fox, who created Undertale. It's the sort of next part of the Undertale saga. So, I mean, this could get bigger, if it sort of revealed a weakness in the system, I think, where there doesn't seem to be much protection for smaller creators.
No, this has been going on for a long, long time in terms of people taking advantage of this system. I don't know why people do it. It's probably just losers trolling. But it is terrifying to know that an individual can just make fraudulent claims, and it doesn't seem to be a case of they're reviewed or whatever or checked for validity. It's just a case of whoever's had those claims made against them, their channel is locked or whatever else. I think it is worth mentioning that issuing false takedowns is incredibly illegal, and if you are found out, you will be punished, like, massively. The first thing I can think of is, I don't know if you remember this, there was a YouTuber called Lord Nazer who was uploading tracks from the Destiny 2 soundtrack, but Nazer basically made loads of fake DMCA notices to other creators who were uploading the music, saying it was his, and Bungie is suing him for a whopping $7.6 million. So there are repercussions for taking advantage of this stuff. And hopefully something will happen. But God, how long has the DMCA actually been debated for now as a piece of legislation? and nothing's changed. So hopefully more. I'd like to think that the visibility on stuff like this is hopefully stuff is maybe happening behind closed doors and we're going to see a change to it. But it just seems ridiculous that someone's livelihood, let's be honest, someone's livelihood can essentially be affected in this way. But that is my TED talk. It angers me daily. If I had the time, I would very much like to write something on this in terms of reaching out to video game composers specifically and finding out how many people have been affected by something like this, because I'm sure this is just one of many other examples.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up that Destiny stuff, because of course the implicit, well, it has been said in some articles that obviously a company like Bungie can afford to kind of set the hounds on someone, but a small creator or a solo creator can't, might not be able to afford to, doesn't know the steps, doesn't know what their rights are, might not be that familiar with copyright. And I'm sure it's really upsetting, really disturbing to have something like this happen. So fingers crossed for a positive outcome.
I was going to say, I feel like I've brought the turn down a little bit. Shall I bring it back up now with the news that I found?
Let's bring it back up. So Matt, there's a couple of stories here that we would have done last time, but we didn't get the chance to record before you went away. So fill me in.
So this is going back to August now, but I think it's still worth mentioning. Blackpink, the K-pop band, one of the biggest K-pop bands in the world, they debuted one of their new singles through their mobile game. So that went down a hit with fans. Elsewhere, and this is a game that I have been playing quite a lot while I have been on my honeymoon, Sea of Stars, which I think is fair to say the spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger. So much so that Chrono Trigger's composer, Yasunori Mitsuda, has even contributed a couple of songs to the soundtrack. Reason I wanted to mention this is there's a really cool documentary done by The Escapist, we'll put a link in the podcast description, which explores the making of the game, but also dives into the soundtrack. A cool fact that I learned, and again, this is something that I found very impressive as a little mosher, the lead composer / audio designer on the game is a guy called Eric W. Brown, who used to play drums in the metal band Necrogoblin. And if anybody hasn't heard of Necrogoblin, basically imagine, that band Lorde that won Eurovision, the hard rock. Yeah. Necrogoblin are literally it's a band where it's essentially fun, upbeat kind of metal, but all of the band members dress in these
Wookiees
over the top. There we go. Exactly it. But genuinely, I got me to dive back into them, and I forgot how much I really enjoyed listening to them. Probably one of the biggest stories is Sky, Children of the Light, breaking a Guinness World Record for the largest number of players in a virtual environment. And whether this is concurrent as well, and on the actual same screen. So when we see these figures for Fortnite concerts or Roblox concerts or whatever else, and it's 3 million people, 10 million or whatever checked this out. In the case of Sky Children of the Light, it was 10,000 players on screen on a single server. And that was for a replay of the Aurora concert experience, which I really wanted to watch, but once again missed as I was not here. Did you get round to checking that out?
I didn't know. There's been a busy few weeks for me too.
It has. But yeah, great work there from that game company team and Aurora 2. Again, I've been banging this drum for ages, but genuinely one of the most, if not the most impressive in-game concerts that I've attended. And then finally, Starfield is out. Yet another AAA game to lose hours of our lives to. Imagine Dragons have dropped a single inspired by the game. We'll put a link to it in the description. It's a really good listen, and I wanted to mention it because it's cool to see a band that are genuine gamers, and I'm sure have been really excited to dive into Starfield, getting involved with writing music that was used to accompany the game. So you can find a link to that in the episode description. Sure, there's plenty of other news out there, but for the sake of this podcast not going on for another 2 hours. I think that's pretty much it on the news front.
I'm sure there'll be more next time round anyway. So let's get to our kind of split topic. I'm going to come back to the interview with Rich about the Sonic Symphony, and Matt didn't hear that interview, so sort of sparing his heart.
Thank you.
But first, Matt, for the topic, we're going to do a lazy one. I'm going to interview you, and we're going to talk about your experiences in the home of. Well, not the home of video game music, but one of the spiritual homes of video game music, I would say.
Well, I think that's they were the first ones putting out physical game soundtrack media. I think that's more than fair.
Yeah, the first video game concerts, I'm fairly sure, in the world in Japan. So, let's have a little conversation about your experiences going into CD shops and what you saw and how it kind of went for you, how much you ended up spending. Where did you head to first in Japan, or was it all Tokyo based?
So I did some research in advance, reached out to a couple of people. Shout out to Andy at VGC, who gave me a list of places to go, and James Milk as well, who we've had on the podcast to talk about. His friend Kenji Ino also wrote me a really comprehensive email of just, here's all the places you need to go, just general tourist stuff, but also, obviously, you love video game soundtracks, so go to these places. Tower Records, I know that isn't something that's exclusive to Japan, but my first time stepping into a Tower Records, so there was a lot of cool stuff in there. I guess the only way to describe it for those of you who are based in the UK is, imagine when you had like Virgin Music and even like the flagship HMV stores in big cities, just wall to wall, just video game music, DVDs and stuff like that. So I picked up a lot of the Square Enix stuff there, like the typical CDs and stuff. So I got a lot of Final Fantasy stuff from there. I got a couple of Distant Worlds CDs, I think, and then Tom, all of those kind of remix albums that I go on about all the time from school. They're really like eclectic ones. There's one that I picked up called Cafe SQ, which has some really cool remixes on of Square Enix music done by... There's some tunes on there from one of my favourite artists, The Reign of Kinder, who I used to listen to loads. There's another remix album which is just called Beer SQ, which was basically marketed as just, I think, music to drink to, like something along those lines. It's just really rowdy, just like party music, basically, just like music you'd get up to and stomp around to. So Tower was cool.
Was that in Tokyo?
Yeah, Tower was in Tokyo, so that was literally where we stayed. We stayed at a hotel called Cerulean Tower, and that's about a 10-minute walk from Shibuya Crossing, the really big one that you see in photos all the time with the like zebra crossing.
Yes, yeah.
That basically. So it's kind of just a short walk away from there. So
it's the centre of the centre, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just for context, I mean, the two markets in the world where CD sales kind of were propped up longer than anywhere else were Japan and Germany.
Yeah.
So I can't even think in London if there is that experience anymore of just a massive CD shop. Because I remember Tower Records years ago, like Piccadilly Circus, and remembering that, but it's gone. They're all gone. HMV, that experience, I don't think really can be had in London anymore. So it's
the same experience as walking into a vinyl store. Do you know what I mean? It's exactly the same, where I think the one thing that going to Japan has made me realise is the appreciation for physical media. Like, it's absolutely mind-blowing how much this stuff is valued over there. And I shared a cool picture on LinkedIn, I'm not sure if you saw it, where a lot of the CD stores that you go into, and not even like the independent ones, the chains as well. I like it when you go into a shop, whether it's a game shop or a music shop or whatever else, and or a book shop. They do this at Waterstone, right, where you can walk in and they've got, do you know where staff members have like notes and it says, name of staff member would recommend this book or this DVD or whatever else. And there'll be a little handwritten note on why they like it and why you as a customer should check it out. These maybe managers or shop assistants were kind of setting up like point of sale displays for new artist releases and stuff. And I know it wasn't promo material because it was that same thing, you know, when you kind of stick together two pieces of A4 and then draw a letter on them and then do that. There were displays that just looked like an arts and crafts thing, but obviously had the artistic talent of like it. It was mind-blowing. There was I went into one store and it had a entire artwork thing, just like a promotional thing dedicated to Dragon Quest's composer. And it was just all Dragon Quest CDs.
Nice.
And it was obvious that someone's just gone, it might be a stock clearance thing, do you know what I mean? But then I'd also be like, well, why have you got all of these Dragon Quest like CDs? That's a little bit weird. So I think that is just genuinely someone going, here's everything that you need to know about Dragon Quest's composer, who was obviously also a really famous Japanese composer as well. His name is, what's his name, Tom?
Koichi Sugiyama.
There we go. So really big name in the Japan music scene as well. And it was just his entire display there for him, which I thought was amazing. The second main chain I went into, have you heard of Book Off or Hard Off?
No.
So imagine Cash Converters or any kind of pawn shop chain in the UK. And obviously when I say pawn shop, I don't mean adult material, I mean
PAWN,
yeah. Essentially one of those, just a second-hand store, but a chain just for geeks.
Right.
So it's all just manga and DVDs, video games, quite a lot of fashion and stuff as well. That's the other thing I noticed about Japan. There's a huge second-hand market for pre-owned clothing. A lot of it really fashionable stuff. Like every other store we went in just had loads of pre-owned like Louis Vuitton and all real stuff as well, not bootleg. But yeah, in these Book Off and Hard Offs, just loads of anime figures as well, but just resealed in plastic bags, do you know what I mean? Because the original package isn't there, but found loads of stuff in there.
And what criteria were you using? Like, what was the leash you were on budget-wise? And were you going to buy stuff where you were confident what it is, or do you throw in a few random things?
I saved up money in advance, and I told myself before I went, not joking, I was like, I'm going to buy a suitcase when I'm out there and fill it up. Because you know how weird my music taste is when it comes to video game soundtracks. A lot of the stuff I listen to was released in the 80s or 90s as like a limited run. It never got a worldwide release. It's only available in Japan. So when I've looked at prices on Discogs, it's always been $50 or something. And I'm not paying $50 for a soundtrack CD, no matter how much I love it, because I'm probably going to get taxed on it when it arrives. And if it arrives, it's probably not going to arrive in one piece.
Yeah.
So I drew up a list in my head of the grails that I wanted, like Kenji Ino's D2 Remixes album. I think I played one of the tracks on there.
Of course.
Yeah, but could not find that. I wanted that on record. Couldn't find that. I know, I was gutted, but that was like a remix album. So then the thing that frustrated me was I think a lot of the stuff I wanted also bordered on the J-pop. It's not going to be under OSTs, it's just going to be under the general music thing, and that's where you've just got like 10 aisles
harder to find
of stuff to go through, all in Japanese as well. So I just couldn't. I was like, I'll just stick to the soundtrack sections, otherwise Liz is going to beat the crap out of me, do you know what I mean? Just stood there being patient. I'm looking at my watch, just like 30 minutes we've been here now. Okay, Liz, you all right? Yeah, I'm just... There's a lot of questionable manga in here. Yep, so Liz, stay the hell away from that section. Do not go in that section. But yeah, loads of cool CDs. I was picking up stuff like what the in-house bands were putting out. So Sega, Sound Team Band, SST, got a 1985 soundtrack from them. I got my Discogs up. Right, so the first thing I did when I got back was I started on the very time-intensive task of uploading my Discogs page so I can quickly go through some of the stuff that I got. So as an example, Namco compilation soundtrack for Winning Run, released in 1989. DRAM, Sega Arcade selection. I think I picked this up for like 300 or 400 yen. The highest it's sold for in Discogs is 145 quid. So you get things like that where it's just... So I guess to go back to your original question, how was I shopping for stuff? It was a mix of, I was seeing stuff and finding it and being like, oh my God, I can't believe I found this. One of my favourites, Hyperdrive by Sega Sound Team, released in 1990. Discogs average sale price, 35.60. Again, I think I picked that up for like a few hundred yen.
Which is what?
Like a quid. Literally like 2 or 3 quid. I think,
really?
Yeah, 100,
wow.
100 yen is...
Because this stuff is like... What, just like bargain bin?
100 yen into pounds, and I definitely picked up a couple of soundtracks for, I think they were more like EPs though, for 100 yen. 50p.
So in Japan, some of this stuff is just obscure bargain bin material, but to you, it's like holy grail material.
It's not that different to walking into a British Heart Foundation or Oxfam, right, and looking at the CDs in there.
Those are charity shops for worldwide listeners.
Like seeing the charity shops and picking up CDs for like a quid or something. It was similar to that over there. But what blew my mind was some of these. There we go. Konami Kakai Club, soundtrack for Snatcher, released in 1989. I got a Shin Megami Tensei soundtrack, released in 1991. And you pick these up and you look at them and you check the date on the back and go, oh, 1980, 1990. If that was the UK, that'd be like in bits, cracked. In Japan, it's still got like the original receipt in. It's still got the Irby strip on the inside. It's still got all of the inserts in like near mint condition. So that was absolutely blowing my mind. So I picked up so much stuff out there. And then also, I was just throwing stuff in the basket as well, just because it was cheap and it looked cool. And I was like, it's in Japanese. I can't read that. I'll put it into my Mac, which has a CD drive, when I get back and listen to it. It was quite interesting as well, finding out how many... I've always sworn by Discogs and VGM DB, but a lot of the stuff, well, not a lot of the stuff, but there was a couple of the soundtracks that I picked up that weren't listed on either. Which is then when I second-guessed myself and was like, I swear to God, if I've picked up a bootleg, I'm going to be so... But legit soundtracks that were just because they were released in Japan, they'd not kind of been archived by a Western audience or whatever else. So
yeah, that makes sense. So one thing I'm curious about is like cover art and CD art. Do Japanese CDs sort of place a premium on that? Is there been a trend towards the kind of minimalistic? Because my vague impression of like Japanese CDs is just it's quite busy on the front and a lot of text, or that might just be Obi strips or something. I'm not too familiar. So how's the artwork across these different decades of music?
The ones released in the 80s definitely have almost like I want to say pop art, but it's not pop art. Almost that Windows early 90s thing, do you know, where it's trying to be futuristic, but you look back at it now and it just looks somewhere in between Microsoft Paint, someone grabbing a load of... someone's Googled planets PNG and just put loads of... It's really out there. It's really out there stuff. I think for a lot of... So this is something I definitely noticed where even if a soundtrack had a global release, the Japan artwork was very different. Same with like game releases and stuff. But yeah, I think the Japanese artwork is definitely not as minimalistic as Western artwork. It seems to be a lot more full on, just very busy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
awesome.
Really, really busy. But yes, some of the stuff that it looks amazing. Like even if I don't play half of this stuff, I'm probably going to get some of it framed or whatever else, especially because some of the inserts that came with it have artwork on, you know, the same way soundtrack companies now put a lot of effort into putting together original artwork and stuff like that, where there's like game captures or original artwork and loads of stuff like that.
Well, we'll have to make sure that we put together, when this episode launches, we'll have to put together like some of your photos on Twitter in the thread, in the kind of launch of the episode thread, and put some of your photos of your lovely new collection pieces, and if you've got any shots of the stores themselves, that would be fun for people to see and get an idea of the vibe.
So Andy told me that I'd have more luck shopping in Turkey. I didn't go into that many shops in Turkey, but I actually got most of my haul just from like a game shop in Kyoto where they just had a game soundtrack section. So imagine you walk into an independent video game store in the UK or US and there's just an entire shelf there dedicated to game soundtracks. And that was where there was a lot of the older stuff, and that just blew my mind. Because it was just down a random side street in Kyoto, about a 10-minute walk away from a temple, and we just saw it on the way back and was like, Liz, real sorry, yep, it's another one, won't be long, promise. As soon as I'm in there and I see the game soundtrack section, I'm just like, oh, she's going to kill me. But there was something in there I got. I've forgotten the name of the soundtrack, but it was I picked it up just because it was 100 yen again. But then when I did my research into it, here we go. Border Break special promo fan disc put out by Sega exclusively in Japan. It was only given away during a special campaign at an event. The chances of me finding, and I'm looking at the style now, style on Discogs, trance, electro, heavy metal, eclectic.
Oh, mate.
I like it. I'm going to give that a listen.
All your trigger words.
Yeah, exactly. So that was probably one of the best things that I picked up. And then, not disappointing, but I picked up what I thought was the soundtrack for Metal Gear Solid. It was called Metal Gear Acid.
Yes.
And I never actually knew there's a strategy tactical game. I think card-based.
I don't know if they're canon story-wise, but they do have some great music. I was checking them out recently, so yeah, I think you'll enjoy those.
That's the only thing that I need to do now, just get everything burnt onto my Mac. And I guess the only other thing to mention as well, which I was really happy with, I'm a big advocate for the music in Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and I happened to find like 3 or 4 different versions of the soundtrack, from like limited time EPs to the full soundtrack. So that really made me happy, as well as the Black Mages album that I picked up because I've always wanted one of those. So happy to add that to my collection. But yeah, it's another 60 soundtracks in total that I came back with.
Crikey.
Yeah, they're not even on the shelf yet because the shelves are full. So something's going to have to go Lizzie's stuff.
Oh dear. And presumably vinyl wasn't really an option to bring back, just for...
I just thought, one, I didn't find any pre-owned game soundtracks. There was a lot of stuff that I already had good distribution. And 2, like you were saying, I was just thinking, it's not going to make it back
in one piece.
So I just thought against it and just went down the CD route, knowing that, like we were saying earlier, CDs are so much bigger in Japan than they are, like especially here in the UK. I can't speak for the US, but I think in the West in general. So just happy to pick up loads of stuff that otherwise... I mean, I think in total I probably spent around 200 quid, I think, and the majority of that, I'd say at least half of that came from paying full price. So, the £10, £12 conversions or whatever for stuff that was brand new at Tower Records. All the pre-owned stuff was cheap as chips, but I think if I was going to buy all of this separately from Discogs at the prices that I'm seeing it now that I've added it to my collection, I would have probably spent about £1,000, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely wild.
The enriching part really is the cultural experience as well. You've kind of seen what it's like and how video game music is just revered and, woven into their culture in Japan in a way that it just simply is not. It's certainly in the UK. So yeah, just feeling sort of warm and fuzzy and nostalgic about old Japanese video games and music. So that's really cool. And of course, speaking of that, I got to go to the Sonic Symphony, and Matt can take his headphones off. He can cover his ears. He can go and cry quietly in the corner while Richard Stokes, video game concert kind of super fan, I would say, and I have a quick discussion outside the Barbican Centre where we went to see the first stop on the Sonic Symphony World Tour. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy this little chat we had. It was a bit of a stonker. Richard's been to absolutely every video game concert I've ever heard of that took place in the UK. He's been up and down the country and round, where others have amassed huge collections of things. He has spent his money and time collecting experiences, I would say. Rich, what's your initial sort of feedback on that show?
I think my initial reaction is that was a bit nuts. That was just, I mean, as you said, I've been to sort of orchestral video game concerts all over the country, and that was definitely one I've not experienced before. That was something a bit different.
What was different?
I think, in fact, it was literally a concert of two halves. The first half was the purely orchestral stuff, all the old classics, and the second half was just more like a rock show.
Yeah. So just to clarify for people. It was one of those video game concerts where they have video game footage all the way through. The orchestra's playing to a click track so that they hit beats in the footage. And I personally, from like an arrangements standpoint, would say that the orchestral arrangements were very kind of hooky, like lots of melodies all clumped together, quite short arrangements, like 2, 3, 4 minutes, and done and just smash out of there. And then the second half, was it Jun Senua?
Jun Senua and Moyo Tani and the video game orchestra guys, Shoten Nakama, and I can't remember the names of the rest of them.
Yeah, so the rock band came out in the second half. I could barely hear the orchestra, honestly.
No, so the orchestra, you couldn't hear much of them at all. Second part, their mics needed to be turned up a little bit more, just a little bit more.
I don't think you could turn anything up anymore, Rich. I think you would literally blow the roof off the.
Well, what do you mean? They haven't blown the roof off already? So, and that lot have got to go out and do the same again tonight as well. So. Yeah, good luck to him.
Yeah, it's interesting because the singer, I can't remember his name, I'll find out later, but he said at one point, the Sonic fandom, of which I'm not really a part, apart from Sonic the Hedgehog 1.
I'm not either so much. I mean, I've sort of played a lot of the older games and some of the more recent stuff, but bits in the middle I sort of zoned out for a few years, so I'll be honest, some of the songs I wasn't quite sure where they came from exactly, but others just through hearing it, through seeing them on YouTube and through the streamer fan base. But so that was definitely an experience I'm not going to forget in a hurry.
It was very exciting, and I think they finished the Sonic the Hedgehog 1 Mega Drive medley. That was literally the first thing in the show, and that's where my recognition of any of the tunes ended. But
then for the next one, they went into probably outside of Sonic 1 my favourite game in the whole series, which is Sonic CD. It's such an underrated game.
The soundtrack is absolutely excellent, and that's basically what we're here for. But I mean, I will say the crowd were incredible.
Yeah,
they were.
I've never heard that at a video game concert anywhere. I don't think.
Yeah, they were
level of crowd noise. That was just ridiculous.
They were one Red Bull short of a permanent heart attack. Yeah, the roof absolutely came off. I mean, people were just screaming, singing, jumping up. And this is the Barbican. This is
one of those venues in the UK where the orchestra is king here. It's one of those where it's you go and see your standard classical concerts, everyone is all dressed smart and it's all very quiet and very, very, very polite. This was far from it.
Yeah, I think I might have seen a Final Symphony concert here, and it was a distant world from that.
Yeah, I'd sort of hazard to say that maybe another venue might have been a bit more appropriate for this, maybe like the Hammersmith Apollo, would have been. I think would have been for that idea because that is used to dealing with a mix of rock concerts and orchestras. Whereas the Barbican is I say it's brilliant for orchestras and things, but for what we saw in the second half, it's something that's not really used to that much. So anyway, this is probably one of the best venues you can see live music in anywhere in the UK. So
I didn't think. I mean, the sound in the second half was a bit of a mush together.
Yeah, but then when you've got all the instruments from the rock band all trying to outdo each other, it was going to be a little bit like that. I think it was. Yeah, some bits were a little bit lost, and some of the stuff on the mics, especially from the singers, sometimes you couldn't really hear what they were saying. I'm
not sure that's the point. I don't think that matters too much in terms of like the crowd enjoyment from the lyrics. But from the orchestral point of view, I'm not sure the orchestra even needed to play in the second. They were so loud. The whole thing was
pretty much. I mean, and that orchestra was one that until today I'd not really heard of them. So that was, I think they were it was the National Symphony Orchestra of Great Britain they were called, but how they've been formed and what they've done, not a clue before today. So, but they did a pretty good first half of the show, so I've got no complaints.
And you've been to a lot of these things. In terms of the fandom, I mean, I'm looking around here. It is an incredibly diverse crowd.
Yeah.
It's very gender balanced. There's lots of young people. There's lots of old people. There's lots of people of colour. It's just a very, very diverse audience. What do you think about the audience compared to, say, the fandoms of other games concerts you've been to?
The Sonic fandom is definitely as sort of more diverse than I've seen from any other concert by miles. Yeah.
And I don't think they could. I don't think this lot could have sat down to a quiet symphonic arrangement of anything.
No, definitely not. I think some of the kids, especially when that second half started, and you had people getting up and dancing and waving their arms and all that. Yeah, it was definitely something that did suited a younger and probably a more of a family crowd.
Yeah, my review would be the first half would be 3 Red Bulls out of 5, and the second half would be 6 Red Bulls out of 5. It was that exciting.
The second half, they just turned it all the way up to 11. It was a bit nuts.
And I'm gutted that Matt couldn't be here to see it. It breaks my heart because I think he was the right person to come to this, not me. But I still really appreciate it, and I have a newfound love of the Sonic fandom, if not the games, because they absolutely tore the place apart.
I mean, just look for the dates and the rest of the tour, and just go to another one of them because you missed out on that's probably one of the best video game concerts I've seen ever, I think. That's probably easy. As I said, I've been to like sort of 20, 30. I think that's easy. That's when inside my top 10 easy.
That's interesting. I mean, it was, and the thing is, this is the matinee performance that I think they must have added because they sold out the evening.
Literally the evening performance sold out in I think about an hour and a half. Just went that quickly. It's ridiculous. I mean, that hence why we came to the afternoon performance, because we couldn't get tickets for the evening one. They just sold out so quick.
But the thing is, energy-wise, the performers left absolutely nothing on the stage. I cannot believe they're going to come back tonight and give it that same welly, because they just gave everything.
They're going to need to down a few Red Bulls or a few energy drinks of whatever kind you want to be able to match what they did this afternoon.
We're not sponsored by Red Bull. Red Bull kept coming to mind, even though it's a blue hedgehog.
Yeah, other energy drinks are also available. So.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. It's always good to see you at these things. You're always here. You're always, wherever we go to these shows, you're like, it's like you look around, it's like, oh yeah, there's Rich. Because you just always manage to make it to these things.
Yeah, because I'm fortunate that I'm only a couple of hours away from London anyway, so most concerts I can get to fairly easily. But I just love video game music in general and want to just soak as much of it in as possible, and especially live.
Yeah.
Here in the game has that you get those special connections and those special feelings while you're playing the game, but then to relive those feelings in an audience with a load of other fans all experiencing similar things, you can't beat it.
Well, thank you for joining me.
That's okay, and thank you for having me.
We've spared Matt the upset, and we're going to move on to Done in 60 Seconds, where we each bring a recommendation, and it could be anything. It doesn't have to be soundtrack music. It could be something else. Usually it's probably a track that we've fallen in love with or been jamming on lately. I will go first. I'm going to get my timer set up. So, Laced Records has announced the pre-orders for Hitman Codename 47 and Hitman 2 Silent Assassin vinyl that I was doing a lot of the marketing work for. And when I do these marketing reel videos for Instagram and other channels, I try and pick the key punchiest piece of music that I possibly can from the soundtrack. And in the case of Codename 47, it seemed obvious that this would be Jesper Kid's kind of powerful cinematic main theme. But as a result, I end up listening to the same kind of small loop of it over and over again, hundreds of times, trying to make these marketing videos. But I must say, this one definitely held up. It is a superb track. It's just got his kind of trademark groove, his trademark melody. So I recommend everyone refresh themselves. From the year 2000, it's the Hitman Codename 47 main theme.
I don't know what I was expecting there, but it definitely wasn't that. But I really, really like it. And I think it just reiterates how Jesper approaches music and just does all of these weird things with so many different timbres. And I really, really liked it. That was giving me, don't know why, but it was reminding me of the music in Time Splitters. And I guess almost like Bond on the N64 to an extent, where it just subverts what you're actually expecting. Do you know what I mean? You hear Hitman, you kind of think you're just going to get some almost generic spy music, and that's like 4 or 5 different genres. It's almost like a techno electronic club thing going on underneath. Do you know what I mean? And
oh, for sure, yeah. Well, it's around that time. So Hitman Codename 47 is year 2000. So it's that era, isn't it?
It sounds of that era. I like it. It sounds impressive, actually.
And David Arnold was doing the Bond music that back in those days, and
I like that a lot. Well done, Jesper. Nice.
All right, Matt, set your timer. What have you got for me?
One of the biggest announcements, at least as far as I'm concerned, from the PlayStation Showcase, the recent one, was the announcement of DLC for the Resident Evil 4 remake, specifically the Assignment Ada. Is it the Assignment Ada? Is that what it's called? The Separate Ways DLC, which looks like, just like the Resident Evil 4 remake has had substantial changes. It looks like they've made some changes to the DLC. Hello, Mr. Wesker. Anyway, that got me thinking about another game in the Resident Evil series, Resident Evil 5. Listen to this music from the multiplayer mode. And the multiplayer mode in Resident Evil 5 was amazing and has this absolute banger of a trance track in there called Rust in Summer. Here it is. One of the best pieces of music, if not the best piece of music ever written for a Resident Evil game, and I stand by that. It's an absolute tune.
It sits right alongside the save theme, the original save theme, as a banger, a true banger. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's just sort of club track, but with that slight, they still managed to get that sort of slight unease, minor chords in there to make sure you know it's a Resident Evil thing, or it's for. But I mean, you know, it's not. It's a far cry from the origins of the series, isn't it?
No, that song does not belong in a Resident Evil game. It does not belong in a Resident Evil game.
I know people do love the Mercenaries mode in Resident Evil 5 particularly.
Yeah.
People are huge fans of it, so it's nice that they get some trance to keep them going. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for on this episode of the GXM podcast. Thanks so much for joining us as we explore the intersection between video games and music. Please be sure to subscribe because, as I teased earlier, we have some excellent interviews coming up. We're back on the schedule. We're back and raring to go at fortnightly, so please be sure to also, maybe if you get the chance, give us a review on your podcast service of choice. That just helps people find us. You can find the show on Twitter, Instagram and Threads at GXM Podcast. I'm at T Quillfeldt on X/Twitter. That's TQUILLFELDT. Matt is at Mat Ombler on Twitter X. That's Matt with only one T. If you've got any feedback, hit us up at gxmpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. The show was produced by both of us. It was edited by me, and music is by Zach Foster. Thanks very much to our interviewee, Richard Stokes.
You've got to wait for the drop, just because the drop is gorgeous. It's so good.